breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James, and let's get started with a question. Is fun a dangerous expectation in organizational culture?
So, yes, when fun is the outcome that you're trying to achieve with your workplace culture, it's problematic at best. I mean, the root of this problem kind of comes down to define fun for me. Even between you and I, who share a lot of similar interests, we have a lot of shared experiences, we have similar backgrounds and upbringings. What we find fun is not the same. And one of the reasons why we really wanted to talk about this topic is because personally, we've been seeing a rise in not quite horror stories, but certainly not good stories about companies who focus on fun as the outcome. Things like prioritizing fun in the interview process, where it seems like every other question is, what does the candidate find fun? How are they a fun person? Are you fun? Do you like fun? All of these, this is such a fun workplace, and almost focusing on fun rather than competency as the driving decision-making process to companies that are, they cling desperately to this idea of fun that, they're still this fun startup, even though they're 10 or 15 years into the supposed startup stage, because they've hinged their entire identity on this one very shallow aspect of being fun. So what I'm hoping that our conversation today, we're going to try and really break down this idea of fun and hopefully provide a bit of an alternative.
Yeah, this idea of, of kind of shifting kind of the impression that you have on people as far as a place to work around fun. I think some of the increased use of it is, again, there's been, because of the kind of international issues around talent attraction and retention. These are two huge topics that are top of mind for most.
Not going to be a surprise to anybody listening.
Exactly. So a lot of it is trying to say, okay, well, we're trying to take things like employer branding more seriously, or trying to take things more like, our outward communication, or our kind of what defines us as an employer. And so I think this is why we're seeing this happen more and more, is people trying to figure out this whole idea of differentiation, like what makes us different from other people. I mean,
they need to do that. I mean, companies absolutely have to have an employer brand. They have to have, just like it's important in the consumer market to have a value proposition to your consumers, you need to have some sort of value proposition to your potential employees.
Absolutely. And again, that is important. But I think what is kind of where kind of the issues are arising is this idea of really not fully thinking through kind of the depth and complexities that kind of come along with these efforts, almost like trying to make shallow decisions to create shallow brands, because we just want to get that box checked so we can get back to business, not realizing this is kind of what your business needs to be about now. You can't just say you got to live it and breathe it every day, right? But regardless of that, getting back to kind of like what this looks like, kind of like, when we try and prioritize this idea of fun, is it kind of really does confuse people who are not necessarily totally vibing with what you're putting out there, right? I mean, the idea of if I was in a job interview and being a very competent, very knowledgeable, very experienced kind of person for a job that I was applying for, we're assuming, and and there was this shift towards trying to kind of find out how fun of a person I am. If I'm not fully getting like we're not on the same wavelength, I'm not totally vibing with you, that's going to make me kind of uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, it's something where we have to kind of realize there's this situation that, not everybody's on the same page. And I think you said it well when you're like, what defines fun?
Yeah. I mean, that's what, for me, one of the big issues I take with it, and there's several. It's like you said, if I'm in an interview if I've applied for a job, I'm really excited about it, matches my skills, my interests. It's something that I have probably spent a lot of time preparing myself for this interview process. I would fully expect that what would be the most important thing in the interview to find out is, am I competent and capable of doing the work? Right? I would be thrown for a loop if I sat down into an interview process and the questions weren't about, this, situational, or how would you handle this, or tell me about your experiences. It's, well, how fun are you? Or what do you do for fun? Well, my fun has nothing to do with work. I don't go to work to have fun, even though I have my own business, right? And I have a lot of autonomy over what I do day to day. But I have fun at work as a byproduct of the work that I do, as a byproduct of the people who I work with.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I'm going to work to find fun.
Mm.
I want to have fun when I go home to decompress from work.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, like you said, like you kind of were saying earlier, the idea of like, this is a fun place to work. We have fun here. We take on fun projects. We do fun things. We're all kind of friends. That kind of idea. In some situations that might seem kind of authentic and very appealing and everything that, but like in others it might kind of have the same cool factor as your middle-aged dad trying to hang out with your teenage friends, right? You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
just might kind of seem like kind of like almost
Hello, fellow kids.
exactly. It might seem very kind of cringy, right?
Yeah.
But the thing too is, but I think that what it really kind of boils down to is a question of, how do you define fun? Because like, for example, I don't think I'm fun. I've never used that as a way to describe myself. I'm laid back. I've got a good sense of humor. But I would not, under any circumstances, describe myself as fun. And I think part of that is because to me, I am a outgoing introvert.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I mean, the idea that introverts get their energy from, kind of like the kind of solitary, kind of alone time or small groups, big, public displays, big group activities really drain an introvert. Um, Actually, it's funny because just kind of a little side note. That's something that's kind of come up in a few other conversations too, is people having this unclarity around introverts and extroverts. You know what? We actually, when we did our episode on psychology a few episodes back, we got some good response to it. Maybe if we do another one, we should talk about those differentiations. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Um,
Complete sidetrack there.
Total sidetrack. But as someone that I would not describe myself as fun. So if that was kind of like what people were looking for from me, I'm like, well, I don't love big group events. I don't like these idea of mandatory in air quotes, or
Mm-hmm.
unmandatory in air quotes, I guess I should say, hangouts after work, or a lot of these big group activities, or this. That's not something that I look for in my work. Like I say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm easy to work with. I'm laid back. I've a good sense of humor, but that does not mean that I'm looking for BFFs in my workplace.
Yeah.
What drives me is kind of the spark to achieve and to kind of, again, like, do kind of cool stuff and kind of have, have an impact. And to me, that's what I look for. And so some people, they would not describe how I work or how I interact at work fun. So, I'm like, well, I'm unsure if would I fit in here? Would this
Yeah.
be a good place for me? Because you're kind of putting me on the spot and stuff that I'm not really aware of, or I'm not even too sure what you mean by fun when you're talking to me in the interview. So it really kind of creates a bit of ambiguity, and it really does kind of create this kind of confusing situation that can actually, really
Yeah.
turn off, highly talented, highly driven people, if it's, again, has that, dad hanging with the teenagers kind of cringy vibe to it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it can create a bait and switch situation where if you don't clarify those expectations, I'm going to
Yeah.
think that what I find fun is the definition walking into the workplace, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
If that's not the case, then I'm going to feel like I was sold a bill of goods that just it's not matching what my expectations are. And that is problematic at best too. But it's not just about recruitment where we see this.
Mm.
And I chuckle at I use the example of the startup
Mm.
in kind of my initial answer because to me, that feels like the middle-aged dad trying to hang out with be the cool dad hanging out with the teenagers, right? Trying to
Yeah.
make friends with their kids and their kids' friends. And like it's so okay, if your company's been around for 10 or 15 years and you still classify yourself as a startup,
Mm.
are you a
Yeah.
failed business? Like really though? I mean, the point like a startup has like that's the beginning of the business,
Right.
right? There needs to be you can't be a startup forever. You
And
can't identify your business as a startup if you've been in business and generating like if you're pre-revenue for 15 years as a startup, that's an entirely like that's
yeah.
problematic at best.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that we're so hip and cool and fun, and we have beanbag chairs, and we have pizza Fridays, and we have um, ping pong tables and foosball in the break room because we are a fun, hip startup.
Well, it's like, we are trying to emulate Google from 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right? Like it's
But I
that.
mean, it's how we've ended up with these very, very shallow
Mhm.
employee engagement strategies, right?
Yeah. Well,
Because you're trying to be fun, but you're
mhm.
trying to be generically fun,
Mhm.
right?
Well,
How can you be generically fun?
and the other thing too is let's, let's flip. We talked about what that looks like when there's a mismatch in expectations, but let's talk about what about if employers like, yeah, this is what I want. I want this fun workplace. Then the question kind of becomes, okay, so, I'm going to my job because my job is fun. I'm going to go have fun there. I'm going to play on the foosball table and this, but like when, whoa, man, why are you asking me to do work? I thought this was a place for fun. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so where's the prioritization of it, right? Because I mean, what do employees need to expect from you as an employer if this is a fun workplace? What is the, ratio of actual hard work to fun? You know what I mean? Because that's something that's also tough too. Is you come here for the fun, you don't come here for the work. Well, then why are you bugging me to work if that's not what this place is about, right? So there's
Well,
so
and who has ever had a job where every aspect of it has been something that you enjoy?
that's not a thing.
No, it's
No.
not. I mean, going back to us, like we
Yeah.
own our company. Like we should have greater autonomy in
Mm,
terms of deciding what we want to do, what projects we want to take on than most people have. We are fortunate that way.
yeah.
But there are still a lot of things that have to be done that
Mhm.
are not fun for us to do.
Exactly. And I think where we're going, I think where we'll end up having a bigger chunk of the conversation. We'll be talking about, how this expectation of fun can set people up to fail.
Yes.
And so, and so we classify kind of, so a lot of the results, the consequences of, again, this prioritization of fun used poorly can create what we call a chaos solution. So we did an episode a little while back about, about creating chaos solutions, which are basically, when you initiate something without fully understanding the complexity of it, and it ends up creating kind of, a domino effect
Mhm.
of problems that make you often kind of worse than when you started. So there's a few episodes back that we talked about that. So if you're curious about this idea, you check that episode out. But really, I think what we'll talk about is there's a number of chaos solutions that come from this fun. And I think the first one that we'll talk about was what you said earlier about employer branding.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, trying to make an employer brand without understanding the complexities behind branding and what fun could mean really does create this chaos solution where, like I say, there's the bait and switch. There's this idea of the skills mismatch. There's the
Mm-hmm.
idea of people, with high skilled people, and feeling like this will not be a place that they want to work because they won't be able to, they don't know what's expected. But it also kind of creates this generic idea of, we're kind of, we're trying to have fun without really defining it, without kind of saying what it looks like, and kind of hoping that this one word will do all the heavy lifting for us. So it really does kind of create some major issues
Yeah.
around employer branding when we try and lean into this, we're Google from 2000, right?
And I think for me, it presents like from the employer branding perspective, it's just, if the only value that you can offer your employees is fun, then are you a stable business that I want to attach myself to for the next X number of years?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Am I actually going to be able to grow my career with you?
Right.
Or is this just a place for me to hang out and collect a paycheck until it goes down in flames? I mean,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if the cornerstone of the value that you offer people is we are just here to have fun,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then I know going in, this is or my perspective personally would be, this is a sinking ship. So either I'm here to collect a paycheck for as long as I possibly can and then try to get out before the whole place burns up, or I'm looking for an opportunity to actually grow and advance my career, and I'm going to choose somebody else over you.
Right. Well, and we should also clarify too. I think we should have said this a bit earlier, is that often this commitment to fun or this commitment to fun, sorry, can look in a few different ways. Sometimes it's as overt as this is one of our core values in our mission
Yep.
statement, and often that's more in kind of that more startup mentality like
Mm-hmm.
that. But even in kind of more traditional companies that may not structured like the startup piece, there might be this newer shift where we're trying to kind of like differentiate ourselves by saying this is a fun place to work, like and our employees, we look for employees who are here to have fun, and it's not as kind of overtly in your face. It's a bit more of like part of the trend of the conversations and trend of kind of the shift that they're trying to make. But again, that's shallow shift. So it's something that it can look different in different companies.
Mm-hmm.
But it is something that, again, like it's how they're trying to portray it and what they're trying to think that means. But it's also by checking that one box, what boxes are you unchecking?
Yeah. And for me, it is the focus on fun as an outcome,
Right.
right? Our objective here is to create a fun environment. I
Mm-hmm.
have no problem with having fun at work.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, to me, that's not the issue. It's not that people should not have fun at work. It's that fun at work should be a byproduct of doing good work, of doing work that you find fulfilling, of
Right.
doing work that you are actively engaged
Mm-hmm.
in working with people where you feel like you belong, right? It's the byproduct of having a good workplace culture where people feel psychologically safe, where they feel included and that they belong, and where they have
Mm-hmm.
work that engages them,
Right.
will create that byproduct of people will naturally have fun at work. But
Mm-hmm.
if you focus on fun as the objective, you're going to miss the depth of and quality of workplace culture that will just bring so much more productivity, so much more fun in the end,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't focus on fun as the outcome.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of going kind of to kind of add on to what you talked about, kind of with kind of engagement and everything like that. We talked about this a few times. I'm not sure if I talked about it on the podcast or not, but kind of the difference between focusing on employee happiness versus
Yes.
employee engagement. Because I mean, one of the things that can be again, as much as a chaos solution as fun can be, is kind of happiness as a focus, right? We want our employees to be happy. Well, happy's great, but you can be happy and complacent.
Oh
You
yeah.
can be happy and lazy. You can be happy and absolutely phoning it in. Like I'm getting a great paycheck and I do nothing. And some people that could be the pinnacle job that they're
Some
trying to
people,
reach.
that's what makes them happy at work.
Exactly. Whereas the idea, you're right. Just like we talked about in an episode about a previous episode about should companies be doing employee engagement? And
Mhm.
our kind of cheeky answer to that is no, you shouldn't be doing engagement. You should be creating the culture that engages people. And engagement, kind of like I said, with fun, is kind of a bit of it's the consequence. It's natural consequence. It's the outcome. It's the results of creating the right culture where people are, again, psychologically safe, feel like they belong, and
Mhm.
and are engaged in their work, right? And if they find motivation, enthusiasm in the work that they do. And so with happiness, it kind of is really, it's kind of almost like the other side of the coin. Or very, at least very similar. The idea of like, should we be happy at work? Well, again, that could be a byproduct of having motivation and enthusiasm in your work, which is how we define engagement. But
Yep.
engagement should be the thing that you're trying to create, not necessarily happiness, because happiness will maybe not, I mean, people may not be as happy if they're well paid, motivated, and enthusiasm than if they're well paid to do nothing. But there's still a level of
Yeah.
happiness that you can achieve by having a very engaged and motivated and enthusiastic workforce.
Yeah, I like the happiness tie-in because it also ties very close to things like job satisfaction.
Yeah.
And you don't want unhappy employees, right?
Right.
If people are actively unhappy, just like if they are if they are dissatisfied with their jobs,
Mhm.
that's going to create a whole bunch of issues for you. Performance, productivity, otherwise, culture, toxicity, complacency, you name it.
Right.
But with happiness, you don't want unhappy employees, but do you necessarily need everybody to be happy at work all the time? No.
Right.
They need to do their job. They need to
Mhm.
be productive. They need to be compensated properly for the work that they do. They need to be treated with dignity and respect. And if they are happy with that, wonderful. But as long as they're not actively unhappy and causing problems, fine, great.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't really care about happiness in the workplace because, again, our focus, the objective we are trying to achieve as a business is not happiness. It's to create a culture, hopefully, where people will be happy, hopefully, where people will have fun. But we have a job to do,
Right.
and that's not always fun, and it's not always going to make you happy.
Right. And it's funny. So one of the other so like I guess the third chaos solution, being employer branding being one, employee engagement being another, third one, is the idea of like fit, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so like we talked about in a couple episodes ago, and this is I'm just really referring back to a bunch of old episodes.
So are we just doing a clip show here or what?
Kind of think that's what this has
Because
devolved into.
yeah. Well, I mean, when the podcast's going on 2 years now, so we've had a lot of topics covered.
Right. But going back to the episode we did on should we be hiring for fit? One of the things that we talked about there is it's kind of like our spectrum program, where the idea like that there's different roles in for highly successful teams, and like it's like, and like four of the main ones, there's the finders, who are the explorers and kind of look for new opportunities and kind of bring opportunities to the organization. There's binders, that are the kind of the people focus, like bridge builders, kind of like the people, right? When we see companies that are kind of trying to hire for fit and trying to hire people that they think will have fun working with them, those kind of like great people. Those two kinds of skill sets tend to bubble to the top because they're often kind of like, extroverted. They're often very people focused. They're also very enjoyable to work with. And, again, very, very important skills to have in the workplace. But when we talk about a strength-based team, those two skills alone don't necessarily can't achieve the entire job, because two of the other ones are the minders, which are more the administrators, like, the detail focus, kind of like keep people on schedule, and the grinders, who often are kind of the workhorses that kind of bury their head and kind of do a lot of the digging and stuff like that. They're very focused on the work. Those two types of people often don't appear on the surface to be as much fun as the outgoing, extroverted finders and binders, but they are essential to keeping things on task and the work getting done.
Yeah.
So, when you're trying to, again, build teams and you're too focused on fun, you might, again, overstack people that are the finders and the binders, who are, again, that easy, overtly traditional sense of what fun might look like, and missing two of the key elements to actually getting the job done. And actually, and the whole idea of, like, being able to kind of have this well-rounded team and highly successful, high-performing team requires a mix of different skill sets in order to achieve that. And if kind of that baseline that you're trying to look at as a key filter or key lens when you're assigning tasks, building teams, hiring people, whatever it might be, is this, how is this going to be fun? How is it going to be the most enjoyable? How is everyone going to be the happiest, to work with that, that idea, that morale piece. Sometimes you have to realize that you need, you can't just, you have to look at, again, from that broader step back, understanding the complexity of what makes effective teams, just like understanding the complexity of what fun could really mean.
Yeah, I like this point because, to me, it brings to mind years ago, working as part of a small team, and I had a colleague who phenomenal, smart, driven, incredibly detail focused, and brought a tremendous amount to the team and to the organization. Nobody, herself included, would classify her as a fun person, right? That wasn't what they wanted from work. They were brilliant, though, and their contributions to the team were huge. I mean, it was a small team that I was a part of, and if we had been focused solely on fun, rather than, like, it took a while because my personality can be hard for some
Very
people.
different, very difficult to work with. Very,
Hard
very
for some people to take. Yeah. Anyways, moving on. It did take some time for us to learn how to work together. But where we built our professional relationship was on mutual respect and competency and what we were achieving. Because we were very, very different people, personally and professionally. But holy crap, this person, I would never hesitate to work with this person again. They were phenomenal at everything that they did, and so brilliant in their analysis. Anyways, doesn't matter. But that exemplifies to me not only the value of a strength-based team, but what a missed opportunity it would have been if the organization hired for fun, or had this focus, because this person certainly pulled their own weight and helped carry the team at times too, depending on the projects that we were leading.
Right. And I think, like, sometimes when in those kind of situations, it's often like, well, I really, I only want to, or not, I only want to, but, prioritizing working with people that I like to have a drink with, or I like to hang out with afterwards. Right. And that is such like a terrible kind of benchmark to kind of hold, team cohesion to, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, and I think why maybe, maybe if we had to kind of get to the root cause of why that mentality might still be present, today, is when teams are riddled with job dissatisfaction and then mutual respect's not there, then hoping that these people will click is
Yeah,
the only thing that's going to get anything done or keep them
that's a good point.
from being at each other's throats, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like, we are all our employees are miserable, but if they've got buddies they can hang out with, then that at least, keeps them around a little bit longer than if they were constantly, fighting with people because everybody was miserable, right?
Yeah. If everybody's miserable and paid terribly and the work environment was poor, you're never
Yeah.
going to. But hey, if we can let them have friends at work and try to use that as the only tie-in to keep people there, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So there may be some truth to that, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't know that it's ever that deliberate in the
no,
thinking.
God
I don't
no,
think there's ever that level of self-awareness.
no.
But yeah, no, it's
No.
interesting.
And that may be like when we say, it's often, in most workplaces, it doesn't necessarily look like this focus on fun as being the mission statements and stuff like that, when it is that more subtle piece. Maybe that's what it might look like in a lot more common workplaces, where it's about kind of like, focusing on the on the fit side of it, about having people that will fit together, that'll be a cohesive
Mhm.
group, that will be like, that will enjoy each other, because that's the only thing to enjoy when you work here. But I mean, like, so it might be more about trying to lean again, having
Not
the
understanding what fit means and using
yeah.
fun as a substitute for it is,
Mhm.
yeah, a lazy way of trying to get around that.
Yeah, and I think that, and which is kind of again why you kind of get into a bit of like chaos solution, because the other piece, going back to fit and fun, is how does that impact with like belonging, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, so then, because we talked about in the episode about fit, kind of like, fitting in and being a good fit, right? And fitting in is being more about like, about assimilation, where being a good fit is more about complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
And when you are fitting in, you're simulating as an expectation. Then this idea of, well, we want everyone that has the same idea of fun, that is all the extrovert people hanging out, grabbing a drink after work, friend groups, cliques in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, that's kind of that too. Well, again, if I'm a serious person that works really hard and gets a lot of enjoyment out of the work that I do, but I wouldn't consider myself to be an outgoing person who wants to hang out outside of work, or would be fun, then I'm not gonna then I wouldn't belong here.
Yeah.
And what's good about your story about your coworker was that, this was a person that you enjoyed working with, that was enjoyable to work with, but you wouldn't say that you were friends. You wouldn't say
No.
that that you guys had a lot of fun hanging out together at work, but you had great mutual respect and were able to work very effectively and enjoyed the work that you did
Yeah.
because of the mutual respect built foundation for your relationship. And that's not what people would classify as fun. So, you miss that opportunity to have those kind of connections to your coworkers when you're trying to kind of force this idea of fun, assimilated, we're all, hanging out, friends kind of piece, happiness, focus, right?
Yeah.
Is where I think that, is where I get a lot of that
So
mishmash because of belonging.
are people mistaking fun for harmony? Like, are they trying
Yeah.
to get to a harmonious, like a non-conflict riddled workplace, and they
Mhm.
think fun is a means of getting there?
That's a really good question. And actually, I think that we should jump into what we think could be some alternatives to fun in a second. Let's hold that thought. But one thing I wanted to add before we did that was, we've kind of said this before about, like, the problem with focusing on fun with employees is, is really where we're focusing on the majority of it.
Yeah.
But fun can also be a difficult thing as far as kind of when it talks about the work and the tasks that you have. Like you mentioned, you and I, owning our business, we have, we have to do a lot of things that aren't fun. I think that's something that companies, and this is probably more in the startup realm, where there are companies that, maybe have fun as too high of a value piece. Because I remember it's a while ago, I can't remember where it was now, but I read a really interesting article, about a CEO from a startup that, fun was like, the biggest part of their value statement. And what that did was had them choosing only fun projects, often at the expense of like the real work stuff, like the
Yeah.
gritty, the stuff that was essential for having them to, actually build a strong business. And actually, and if they focus on just things that they enjoyed, it really, like hindered their growth. They kind of had them spinning their wheels because they weren't doing the hard, real stuff that's essential to business success. They were just doing the stuff they thought would be the most fun.
Yeah.
And again, and the other thing too is like, sometimes people mistake fun in the tasks as being kind of whatever you want to do. But I think people undervalue the importance and the job satisfaction that can come from boundaries and
Yeah.
limitations, right? I mean, we talk about this when we talk about rules that empower and rules that restrict in our autonomy freeway program. The idea of setting clear rules, clear boundaries, clear processes that people can have full autonomy to work in, letting them color right to the corners of this fence you've built around their authority and their work. That can be very enjoyable because it can be very freeing because it can often alleviate micromanagement. When you say,
Yeah.
here's how much you can spend, here's how much, here's the timeline, here's the expectation, here's the delivery, you create this kind of the square around what they can do. And then within that,
Yeah.
this fence I built
As
you.
long as you're not doing X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
have at it.
Yeah. And I think that, that idea of those, of people undervalue how enjoyable work can be with a very structured environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that's totally missed by this idea of looking at their fun projects, or or doing only things, taking or only doing the parts of the job that you enjoy, that you find fun. Is I really think that there's something that great work comes from limitations and from again the structured pieces
Yeah.
of the work that we do. So I think yes. So moving on, why don't we talk a little bit about some alternatives to kind of that prioritization of fun? I think harmony is something that you mentioned that could be a reasonable, maybe not the word you want to have in your mission, your mission and
No,
vision.
but I think that's what people are trying to get to, right? People are trying to get to a workplace where that's not riddled in conflict, that's not riddled in job dissatisfaction, that's not, so they, for lack of a better term or option, they default to fun when what they want is this idea of, well, the workplace culture hierarchy, right? Where
Mhm.
people can feel that they belong, where they have work that engages them, where they are psychologically safe, where the factors of the workplace are not creating job dissatisfaction, right? Where people are treated with dignity and respect.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's what we're trying to get to.
right. Yeah, and I think that that there's not that's not a bad option to kind of consider if you're trying to achieve this outcome. That may be something that might give you a bit more clarity in how you
Mm-hmm.
get there without kind of all the negative side effects and chaos solution that might come from, I think, something like fun.
Yeah.
I don't think it's perfect. I think that it's an option. I wouldn't say it's the perfect option.
I wouldn't use words like harmony in any type of employer branding
No,
piece of
no.
stuff. It's
More is that outcome piece, the thing that we're
yeah, it's
striving
what
for.
we're trying to get to.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Another one that kind of came up, I remember seeing it before, was from, I can't see if you can help me remember the name of the company. It was about I think it was weird or weirdness.
Oh yeah. We were
Yeah,
talking about
remember?
this a while ago.
Yeah, and
Um, from
it's
Zappos. Um,
right. Yeah.
yeah, they've
That's
got
the one.
a part of their, is it their mission statement? I'm going to totally butcher this because I'm trying to go off memory from a conversation a long time ago. But they have as part of their mission statement, or like core values,
Yeah,
this idea of not fun, but weird,
yeah,
which
yeah.
at first sounds really weird.
It does.
Right? Until
Yeah.
you actually dig into it. And I remember our conversation going back and forth on this and debating it, because how is weird actually a valuable value or something
Yeah.
valuable to have in as part of your workplace.
Mhm.
But the way that it was articulated, the way that it was actually implemented and used was as a means of, we value what makes you you.
Mhm.
We value the individual. We value the idea that each person brings something unique, and we're all in our own way kind of weird.
Mhm.
I can certainly say I am. I'm
I can
not sure
attest to
how
that.
I would answer that question in an interview. What makes you weird? But the idea, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't use it as an interview question because it could lead you down a whole road you do not want to go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I kind of like this idea though, because it's a, for lack of a better word, it's a fun way of talking about what makes people unique or what makes you different, right? And that
Uh,
we actually value the individual over, as you were talking earlier, Kobe, it's not about assimilation,
mhm.
it's about being a
Acceptance.
good fit.
Yeah. 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 And that's the thing. Yeah. The idea of kind of everybody is a little weird. And the idea of like, we accept
And
that.
if you're not, that's what makes you weird.
Yeah, there you go. We embrace that you can almost feel comfortable bringing your whole self to work because we get that you're a weirdo like everybody else that works here. And it's also a bit disarming too, right? I mean, I think that it's something that you'd have to do really well if you're going to
Yeah.
lean heavily
I'd be
into.
very, very cautious of just trying to plug and play the language
Yes.
around weird into your employer branding. Please do not take that as
Yeah.
a recommendation from this
Here's our advice.
podcast.
If this is interest to you, definitely seek an employer branding professional to help you
Yeah,
with this. Don't
yeah.
go with our advice
Don't go
alone.
off of our conversation. Just plug weird into your,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Just yeah. But yeah, but it does kind of bring forward this kind of cool idea of, again, letting people be accepted for their uniqueness. And it's also a matter of like, kind of also there's that sense of like, you can be yourself here.
Mhm.
And I think that gets you a lot closer to the goal that you're trying to maybe get towards, around maybe even harmony, or where you're trying to go with fun. It gets you there a lot cleaner. Again, a little bit more work to kind of give you the context of what we mean by it. But once people get that, I think it's a much cleaner path there. Again, some work has to be done up front around the messaging and the branding and everything like that. But I do think that there's value in there. And I mean, it's something that is again, it was Zappos, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the shoe company, right? Yeah. So I'm assuming, yeah, I have to go back and double check, but I imagine they do it really, really well. So I suspect if you want to kind of get a better idea, look them up and
Yeah.
kind of how they do it. Um, but again, it's it is an idea of, again, it is something that might be a better alternative to kind of get you to where you want to go, over fun.
So maybe the last thing we'll talk about is, I think, from, well, our language, we talk about it in terms of mastery, in terms of skill mastery,
Right.
and this idea that you really need to identify, value, and use the skills of the people you have working with you.
Hmm.
Because if you identify people's skills, if you value their skills, and if you put those skills into use, you're going to be allowing people to play to their strengths greater. You're going to
Hmm.
be allowing them. I mean, you can't have only work that is fun or that is perfectly aligned with that. But if you can put a greater emphasis on that, if you understand the skill mastery and use that as a mechanism, you will create the outcome that you're trying to achieve with fun rather than focusing on it as the objective.
Yeah. No, that actually is a good suggestion, because I mean, like, because again, yeah, when we talk about kind of mastery comes up, we talk about kind of our tools and strategies for employee engagement, stuff like that. And And the idea of letting, because actually even kind of going back to the strength-based teams, right? Because part of the value of a strength-based team often is kind of the idea of mastery is kind of built in there a little bit, because it's about doing more of what you're already good at.
Yes.
And you're right, it's about kind of like identify, use, and challenge is really kind of the three ways that we break it down in some of our training programs, right? That you want people to kind of know the skills that they identify, the skills that you have available to you and to them, use them effectively, don't just
Yeah.
waste them, but also push them to do more with it.
Yeah.
And that's where you kind of, again, further develop it. But I mean, if you're in a job, if you're in a team, if your work is about people, my skills are seen, my skills are utilized, and I get to, and I'm challenged on the things that I'm already good at and that I want to get better at. There is something bold and empowering and fun and enjoyable and harmonious about that being your everyday.
Yeah.
And so there really kind of is, and again, I don't know if the word mastery would be what you want to put in your mission statement. But I think that is something about, again, the idea of, again, identify, use, and challenge your skills and do more of what you're already good at and kind of, play to your strengths. That kind of ideas, whatever word you want to use to define that. Again, this is why you can talk to an employer branding professional. Would help you kind of be able to kind of mold that to kind of help, this is kind of what we are aiming for in our everyday. I think that would be a good, another good alternative to, trying to use fun.
Yeah, I think mastery, skill mastery, just that idea of playing and to people's strengths and helping them to improve their strengths is
Yeah.
just a wonderful, we use it, like you said, as part of our engagement strategies, building engagement, not
Engaging with.
we've talked about that to death. Yeah. So weird. We cautiously hope that you will not rely on our faulty memories and do your own research. But mastery, that is something that we absolutely know will provide the outcome that you're looking for, if as a much better substitute than just we are fun.
Right. Okay, cool. I think this was a good conversation. I think I'll do a bit of a wrap up.
Okay.
So the question was, is fun a dangerous expectation in organizational culture? And we really say a profound yes. Fun can have a lot of or a lot of negative consequences when kind of unclarified or ambiguity, or really not digging into the complexity of it, because it can it can impact employee expectations. It can impact the the way that you have your recruitment process set up, and how you might turn people off who could be a real asset to your company. But it kind of boils down to the biggest concern is how you define fun, and how do other people define fun. By not really fully getting the complexity of what this means, you can create chaos solutions by leaning into fun. It can have a negative impact on your employer brand. It can have it can end up hurting the way that you create engagement in your employees. It can impact the way that you have utilize the skills and build your teams and kind of have complementary skill sets. It can really impact belonging. And it can also have a negative impact on the projects that you choose, the work that you do, and kind of the focus that your company has on the everyday tasks that are required to have a growing and successful company. So we suggest there might be some alternatives that could help you be able to kind of get to where you want to go, maybe with a bit more clarity and a bit more focus. So the three we kind of recommended, and we cautiously say that you should definitely have some experts help you if this is going to be part of your messaging. So the first was harmony, around trying to kind of build this sense of kind of cohesion and kind of the morale and the kind of the easy to engage in workplace that you're looking for. Next was weirdness, or weird. That's something about kind of appreciating and accepting people's differences and allowing them to kind of bring their whole self to their jobs. And the last one was mastery or skill mastery, about letting people do more of what they're good at. Saying that we want to understand your skills, we want to utilize them, we want to challenge you to be better at what you're already good at. That, those three as alternatives could be something that could be a great part of how you position your organization, position your employer brand, how you seek to kind of add skills to your team, and kind of how you take on projects and how you take on kind of initiatives as you go forward. So again, we caution companies to not fall into the trap of fun, whether that's your big mission statement, or whether it's just kind of how you start to kind of show the value proposition of your organization and the benefits of working with you. It's something that can end up doing far more harm than good. All right. So that about does it for us. For a full archive of the podcast and access to the video version hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.